This film is a bore. It's supposed to show how the Beatles work, but it doesn't. Shot without any design, clumsily edited, uninformative and naive, it would have destroyed a lesser group. Yet there they are, singing away, charming the pants off the most cynical of pop music haters. I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and that's what the reviewer in the Observer newspaper thought of the Let It Be film back in May 1970. But how does the newly restored version stand up 54 years later? Let's find out. I first saw Let It Be a week before my 13th birthday, on the 26th of December 1979. It was the final Beatles film to be shown in the Beatles at Christmas season on BBC television, where all their films, including Shea Stadium, were screened in the space of a week. We didn't get a video recorder until 1984, but I received this cassette recorder as a Christmas present the day before, and had used it to record that afternoon's broadcast of A Hard Day's Night from the television. So the next day, I made sure I was ready again in front of the television with the microphone carefully placed to record Let It Be. I even had the foresight to do an introduction for this video, and yes, I did get the time wrong.
Hello, yes, it's me, Andrew, and we have recorded for you another film, the last one in the series of the Beatles at Christmas on BBC Two. This is the 26th of the 12th, 1979. The time is 10 to 7, and hear the Beatles in Let It Be.
I saw it again on the same channel when it was rebroadcast for the last time on British television on the 8th of May 1982, which coincidentally was exactly 42 years to the day before the newly restored version was released. And although it came out on VHS and Betamax in the States, Germany and the Netherlands in the 1980s, it wasn't easy to find in the UK, and it was many years before I saw it again. Now, if you're not a Beatles fan, Let It Be is a bit of a tough watch, and after experiencing Peter Jackson's amazing Get Back, viewing the original again is an odd experience. Labelled for years by many as dark, gloomy and depressing, Let It Be and Michael Lindsay-Hogg's direction deserves reappraisal, and thankfully this restoration gives us the perfect opportunity to do just that. But before we get to my review of that, let's just put the original film into some kind of context. Creatively, up until mid-1967, the Beatles got it spot on, but their lack of organisational perspective in their projects suffered badly after the death of Brian Epstein. Let It Be was the first time they'd let anyone direct them in a film since Richard Lester in Help. Paul had chosen to do it himself in Magical Mystery Tour, and clearly didn't want the job again. Michael Lindsay-Hogg was a talented young TV director, but communicating with, let alone directing the Beatles at that point in time, was never going to be an easy job. Not to mention pleasing four people who were all going in different directions and were rarely on the same page. The fact that the film's original goal changed dramatically early on made it impossible for Michael Lindsay-Hogg to provide either the fine-tuned narrative or chronology of Jackson's Get Back. And although Get Back and Let It Be are completely different projects, it's impossible not to compare them. One of the Beatles' biggest mistakes in this project, I feel, was pushing out George Martin. His presence in the film is minimal at best, where he's humiliatingly relegated to percussion duties. This photo especially speaks volumes about the frustration he must have felt about being frozen out of the creative loop. It was only when the project had ground to a halt that the Beatles realised how much they needed him. It must have given him great satisfaction to see the Beatles eating a rare slice of humble pie a few months later when they asked him to produce the Abbey Road album. Despite its low-key opening, Let It Be begins optimistically, with the Beatles seemingly in good spirits, mugging and grinning for the camera like naughty schoolboys. Paul wisely gets Maxwell's silver hammer out of the way first. We're then shown that the old camaraderie is still intact, as John and Paul treat us to a joyous stand-up version of Two of Us. Even Yoko appears to be enjoying herself during I've Got a Feeling. Now, Michael Lindsay-Hogg's original plan was to film the Beatles rehearsing and then perform a grand concert, which at one point was planned to be inside an amphitheatre. However, those plans and the film project itself were thrown into disarray just before lunch on Friday, January the 10th, when George quit the group. That incident and its fallout, which is covered in depth in Get Back, isn't even mentioned, let alone shown in Let It Be. Instead, the focus is upon an earlier, seemingly minor argument between Paul and George. After this incident, the tension is clear to see in the way that George glares at Paul as he's singing I Me Mine. Suddenly, the action shifts to the Apple basement, with George performing For You Blue like nothing has happened. However, I'm sure omitting such a minor detail as George leaving the band wasn't the director's doing. While I'm at this point, some fans have bemoaned the disappearance of a transitional wipe between these scenes. As dated as that effect is, I find it odd that they've removed it. Not just here, but the one just before they go onto the roof too. I'm guessing it was an artistic decision, but it's a petty one, and to my mind, there would have been no harm at all in keeping it in. Of course, some of the things that Get Back didn't include, which Let It Be does, are complete performances of songs like Two of Us, Let It Be, and The Long and Winding Road, along with more of Dig It, whether you liked it or not. In fact, most of the footage that Peter Jackson used in Get Back was almost completely non-Let It Be film. So what we see in the 1970 film is mostly unique footage. But the main thing Get Back exposes about the Let It Be film is its almost complete lack of narrative. The sudden and unexplained appearance of Billy Preston being one such example. Also, we go from the group playing a second-rate rock and roll oldies show in the basement to full-on perfect performances of their new songs on the rooftop. Those rooftop rehearsals were filmed and included in Get Back, and Let It Be sorely misses them. Also in Get Back, the rooftop feels like an achievement after a mighty struggle, which it doesn't in Let It Be. But how does the restored version stack up against the original overall? Firstly, let me say it's great to see Michael Lindsay-Hogg looking so well. I'm so glad he's around to see his original film get the treatment it deserves. Peter Jackson also looked great in that short interview before the presentation on Disney+. I'm not sure whether they were in the same room for that interview, because its hurried editing style made it look as if they weren't. Anyway, on to the film itself. It was clear, even from the trailers on YouTube, that the film was going to look and sound amazing. The first big plus is that it's presented in its original 4:3 aspect ratio, rather than stretching it to widescreen. The second win was the presence of visible film grain. One criticism many, including myself, had of the Get Back series was that the visual elements were over-softened and oversaturated. Much of the original film grain had been erased, giving it a smooth, almost waxy look. Peter Jackson made sure, or was possibly told to, retain significantly more film grain in Let It Be, which he certainly did, even adding it to the end card of the trailer. Compared with Get Back, Let It Be looks like it was made in January 1969. The colour timing and film grain are perfect and period correct. Placing scenes from Get Back and Let It Be side by side shows you just how different they looked. Unfortunately, sometimes when you have a powerful tool at your disposal, it's easy to overuse it. I really wish Get Back had looked as good as Let It Be does now. The sound of the new Let It Be was excellent too. I watched it over speakers and with my AirPods Pro, and whilst not being able to detect any significant stereo or Atmos effects, it was superbly balanced, and the sound of Paul's bass on the rooftop was superb. The rooftop concert is of course the film's crowning moment, and their performances in challenging conditions is nothing short of remarkable. They're so in tune with each other and so tight musically. You can feel all that experience of playing together from Hamburg to Candlestick Park come together for one final time. And by the time they get to the final Get Back, they are on fire. And the way they left the stage so nonchalantly, it didn't look as if they were doing it for the last time. However, the joy of those performances is tempered somewhat by the change in the ending of the film. On the original film, there's a freeze frame just after John's "I hope we pass the audition" line, which is then followed by 18 seconds of a reprise of Get Back. The new version omits that reprise and cuts straight into a new set of credits, over which a version of "Oh Darling" and "I Lost My Little Girl" are heard. Now, I understand the reason for a new set of credits, but that reprise of Get Back was a memorable part of the film, and it's a shame it's gone. Yes, it's a minor detail, but as the primary audience for this film would probably notice its omission, I don't know why they changed it. Sound-wise, the audio was first class. No remixing, demixing, or heavy-handed denoising, just clean and clear audio throughout. The significant improvements to the sound of the dialogue were impressive. And I'm pleased George's F-bomb when he got shocked was allowed through. I also heard other details I'd missed on previous viewings. Ricky and the Red Streaks was a pseudonym suggested by Paul when he proposed they go out on tour again. And just before they launch into Get Back, the first song on the roof, Paul looks over at John and says, "All right, Ricky." Why the rooftop gig wasn't and hasn't been made available as a standalone disc is truly baffling. It's a real gaping hole in their modern discography. After all, it is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best performed and recorded live performances of their career. Now, if you haven't got Disney Plus, whether by circumstance or choice, I'm afraid you're missing out. Well, for now anyway. Although Disney has moved away from physical media, Apple, along with the help of Sony, could persuade them to release this on Blu-ray or DVD at least. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee that this is going to happen, and that's a shame, especially because a lot of additional footage and interviews were made some years ago in preparation for such a release. I'd love to hear what you think about this new version, so do tell me and everyone else in the comments. But please don't write telling me you haven't got or will never get Disney Plus. That's your problem, not mine. Whatever you think of the film itself, this restoration is a triumph. Peter Jackson and his team have really hit the spot, and I hope they've saved those settings for future projects. As to exactly what those future projects will be, only Apple know. But whatever it is, I'm looking forward to it. As for this channel, we've got lots of exciting content coming up. Due to the success of our video on the Rolling Stones' first album, I will be doing more Stones videos in the future, as well as ones featuring other 60s groups. Also ahead, I'll be comparing the sound of my Sgt. Pepper master tape to other pressings, digital and analog, which promises to be fascinating. So make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of those. In the meantime, why not take a look at our Let It Be playlist on the channel, where we cover everything from this original EMI master tape to the 2021 box set. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, Mo.
I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition.
Get back, get together. Get back. Oh, we gotta get together.